Welcome to Lift Your Story podcast with guest Dr. Mark Ryall, teacher, athlete, artist, and author. Hi, everyone. I am Lausanne. I am that gal from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to our Lift Your Story podcast.
In this episode, really pleased to have Dr. Mark Ryall here, and he's a teacher, athlete, artist, and author. Thank you so much for being with us today, Mark.
I'm very excited to be with you, Lausanne and Roy.
Great. Mark, now you're an author, and your book kind of intrigues me. Age-Decoded is about genetic engineering technology.
That's right.
And, you know, I think it's kind of like a futuristic projection of what that might lead to.
Yeah, so it's science fiction. It's not the very fantasy type science fiction. It's more what they call speculative science fiction or hard science fiction, where I am actually trying to project the future. In my book, I go from about 2053 to 2256. So let's say 30 years out to 230 years out. Yeah.
What interested you in writing this book? And what was your motivation for this?
Well, I'm getting older, and I'm a competitive athlete. You mentioned I'm an athlete, so I'm a fairly serious triathloner. I represented Canada at the World Championships for my age group. And I noticed in discussions with some of the other people in my age group, the topic of age and decline in performance does come up. You can feel yourself actually, even though you're training really hard, getting a little bit slower as the years tick on. And so I started just doing a little bit of reading about aging and whatnot. And I came across a number of very interesting articles on genetic engineering and some very serious research going on there about stopping aging and maybe even reversing aging. And I thought, well, that'd be pretty cool for a triathlete. I wouldn't mind going for that, but I could buy into that. But then I thought, what about the world? Forget about triathlon. What would our society, our world, our lives be like if this actually came to fruition, if they could stop or reverse even aging? So that was the motivation for the book. I started writing.
You know, genetic engineering, you look at it, it's got a lot of benefits, but then again, there's a lot of things that may not be so beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it could be used in a negative way.
Absolutely. And we can certainly talk about some of those areas. I'm pretty positive guy myself. But the book does have some dystopian elements to it, especially the first half of it. So you're right. There's a lot of things that humanity will have to be wary of with this new technology.
I like to think about that would spook the heck out of our kids.
Yeah.
I mean, already you look at it, and the boomers are keeping their jobs a lot longer than expected in previous. And if you reverse aging, people can be in the workplace forever if you really love what you're doing, right? You can. It's
sure.
Like there's so many. Yeah, this very interesting thoughts. Yeah, that was spooky.
Yeah, it would fundamentally change just what it's like to live even as one person. For example, in my book, I have a fellow who he likes learning, so he's done something like 15 PhDs through the 200 years. Why not? Why would you stop at one, right? And then there's also a character in my book, an older Buddhist, very contemplating, very deep thinker type guy he's almost 80 years old, but he's been age decoded so that he can't get any older, but he's sort of locked into a very frail state, and he sort of doesn't appreciate it after a few decades. He wonders why he even went for it. Maybe he should have just died naturally. But anyway, he has a granddaughter, and near the end of the book, when they actually invent reverse aging, he's wondering whether he should go for that, because as he says to his granddaughter, if I go for it, and she's 25 years old, in about 55 years, you and I will be the same age.
Wow.
Right?
It's kind of like, be careful what you wish for. Even though
Yeah.
you might get what you wish for, it may not be what you wanted.
exactly. Until you experience it, you never know, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's the nice thing about sci-fi. There are a lot of books written about genetic engineering right now, some great nonfiction books and fiction, but the nonfiction ones, they're very factual and they really lay out the science nicely. But I'm not a scientist in that area. I've learned a lot about this science though, and I felt like I could better teach the world about these potential positives and negatives by speculating and by using real characters, real people with lives they're living and how they feel about things like I mentioned there, the relationship between a grandparent and a grandson or a granddaughter in this case. Those relationships will be changed fundamentally. In fact, being a human will be changed fundamentally because we will be changing human nature. We'll be altering humans, their actual fabric, not just nurturing them like we have in the past. We'll be changing their nature.
It reminds me of that Zagger and Evans song in the year 2525.
Yeah.
You're picking your babies from a test tube, I mean, that's what I think of is you going in. I want the guy to be a boy, 6'2", brown hair, blue eyes, this, and then, okay, we'll put him in the mill. He'll be out, next week. Come on by.
That technology is already available, genetic screening. And one really positive of that is say for something like Huntington's disease, a couple that where they know they have it in their genes, that couple could conceive an embryo or more than one embryo, several perhaps, and then the scientists or the doctors will look at those embryos and determine which one does not carry the Huntington's disease gene, and that's the one that would then be implanted in the female for birth. So that technology is there, and it's becoming more widely available.
Well, I think there's a certain amount of genetic testing goes on anyway, does it? Because I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, we had a genetic test done today," or whatever. So,
yeah, and it's getting pretty cheap now. For like, it used to be thousands of dollars. Now it's within most people's budget. But a lot of the things that will happen in the next 20 years, and things like what happened in my book, will not necessarily be available to everybody. There is an equity argument issue there because some of it's going to be pretty expensive and it's not going to be, provided by whether you have public health care or not. It's not. In my book, though, I did make age decoding, stopping aging, available to everybody for free. I didn't want that to be an issue. So go in there, it takes 25 minutes, no charge, and they'll stop your aging.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like here in the U.S., there's no money in cures.
Yeah, good point.
I don't want to cure anything because there's no money in it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Right here in the U.S., it'd be, well, we can do it, but it's going to cost you this much, and you may have to come back periodically. So,
right.
Just that, unless something changes.
Yeah, there's that conspiracy theory stating that they already have a cure for cancer, but they're just not letting anybody know because then,
well, I mean,
they wouldn't be making money off of it. I mean, it's a theory, but
but surely there's a lot of stuff that they have found cures for that we don't know about. I mean, I think there are probably cures for some things that we don't know about. Who knows?
And that's, there are in real life, there are probably things like that. In my novel, I brought in a conspiracy, similar idea that when people came in for this procedure, because most people went for it, and I don't know if you would or Lorianne, but I probably would. I'd probably go for the stopping. I don't know about the reversing aging, but I wouldn't mind not getting much older now, getting any older. But most people go for it, like about over 90% of people. It's a little bit like vaccines, like most people go for it. Not everybody though, right? And the thing is, when they go in there, unknown to them, there's another bit of tinkering that happens on the psychological front, because genetic engineering can also be used to change psychological traits, which are based on genetics too, a lot of them, right? So there's I don't want to give away too much in the novel, but that's the scandal. Yeah.
Well, I would be comfortable staying at my age,
Right.
maybe just my health be better,
Yeah.
because, I feel, I can't do the stuff I could do when I was 20. Let's be real, but still, I feel good at my age compared to what I thought I would feel like when I was 20, being 70.
That's awesome. And that's great. Yeah. I feel pretty good too. And I'm 62 and, doing all right. I mean, health is so, health is, it's a treasure, right? And we're pretty lucky,
Yeah.
My parents actually made me feel like, they're in their 80s now, and up to 6 years ago, my dad was 83 and skiing black diamonds. And so age it's a strange concept to me. Although my grandfather at 65 to me was old because I'm 83. And apparently he wasn't, but he just didn't do anything. He was so complacent, sat, read, smoked, and that is, his cocktails. That was it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
different.
I can remember being a teenager, 20 years old, and and back at that time, people that lived to 65, they were old. I mean, they really lived a long time. If somebody got to be like 68 or 70, like, oh my gosh, they're ancient.
Yeah.
A lot of people died from the mid 50s to the mid 60s. Now people are living to the mid 70s to the mid 80s and beyond.
Yep. And genetic engineering will solve some of those riddles. Like there's a lot of science research going on in Japan, Europe, United States, etc., China, on Alzheimer's disease. Aging itself is connected to so many other diseases. So if they can slow or stop aging, it will help on many other fronts, which is great. But there are some moral issues, like should we be using genetic engineering to, say, make athletes stronger and set world records? That's going to happen, actually. I'm going to predict that
I'm sure
it won't be a steroids. It'll be genetic engineering that they'll have to try to control. And WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, already has a policy out bracing themselves for this on genetic engineering is taboo for athletes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody wants that football player, that basketball player, the soccer. I mean, that's sure they want that.
Yeah.
That's to say, that could be the negative part of it, in my opinion. The super, the soldiers, the super soldiers. I mean, it just, there's a lot of things there that it may not be the best.
Yeah. You could genetic engineer fearlessness and strength in soldiers and all sorts of things that are possible here. And my number one fear on something like this would be, say, a bioterrorism type thing where you take a COVID type. We've seen what happened with COVID, which is just probably a natural thing, right? Let's face it, there are conspiracy theories on that too. But let's say it was a natural thing that came up. Bill Gates always said, watch out for bioterrorism, because the chances of a bioterrorism event where someone actually manipulates and creates something more potent than COVID, like say 100 times more potent or infectious or whatever, and does it intentionally. Bill Gates has always spoken out about that as a major threat. He thought that threat is bigger than the natural threat, which we've already seen the natural threat.
Yeah.
So fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean,
Curious.
there's a lot of different directions all that can go.
Yeah. So I'm an optimist, though, and I do think a lot of good things are going to happen here. And, like I know, for example, cystic fibrosis is one condition that they're targeting in the research right now. Down in the US, they've already genetic engineered Florida down to the mosquitoes down in that area to try to wipe out disease-carrying mosquitoes. They're doing that right now. They just started that. The coral reef can be apparently saved by genetically engineering coral that's more resistant to warm waters. Depression, they're looking very seriously at depression in University College London right now, and connecting with other things like schizophrenia and bipolar disease. They're looking at all the genes there and trying to align them and figure out where the locations are. So there really is, there's a lot of exciting research going on. Cystic fibrosis and Huntington's, though, are, I think, the two that they keep saying probably within, I don't know for sure, but within 10 or 20 years, they actually might be able to solve those with CRISPR technology type.
I mean, you think about that, dementia, Alzheimer, all that stuff that really affects the elderly. I mean, that would be amazing too, because my mother-in-law has dementia. She's in the facility, and it's really a bad thing, real bad for people.
Yeah. So all of that's so exciting. There was a study that came out this summer. After I wrote my book, I've still been reading about this stuff and thinking, let's see, does that still fit? Is my book holding it all? And you're curious, right? It's like George Orwell. He wrote 1984 and I don't know, 1950 or 49. And he was around for a while, probably thinking, is this still, is this looking okay? Anyway, so I've seen some research come out, and so far so good. Some really incredible stuff. The one study that came out this summer that I was most fascinated by was one where they used only 4 subjects, but they injected these little nanobodies into these subjects, and it carried the instructions for genetic engineering to the specific part of their body, which was the liver in this case. And they were able to turn those little genetic engineering robots almost into to alter the tissue just in that area, not in the rest of the body. And that's pretty fascinating. And they actually got the liver to stop producing this detrimental protein, which was causing nerve damage. They actually got it to stop. So very successful. That Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel Prize in 2020 from the United States, she owns part of the company Intellia, which is involved with that type of engineering. So that stock went up 50% when that study came out, and there's going to be a lot more of that. That's to me, that just blew my mind when I saw that, because that's adult subjects, not even dealing with embryos or anything, and very specific, fine-tuned, amelioration of a disease.
That was a movie, The Fantastic Voyage, something like
I mentioned that,
60s
yeah.
or 70s. It was.
I watched it because Raquel Welch was in it, right? But but I was a young man, but it was actually an interesting movie. You're right, and it's that same idea. You're going into the body, you're microscopic, and you've got a mission. Yeah.
Very interesting.
That sounds like a movie, but yeah. Okay, there we go. So, what is it? You mentioned CRISPR. Can you tell us what that is for people that don't know, like me? Yeah,
so CRISPR, I'm not going to do the acronym because it's a polysyllabic mouthful, but it's the, I mentioned Jennifer Doudna. It's the #1 genetic engineering technology right now. Now, there are other technologies for genetic engineering, like Harvard is now talking about their retro library recombinering RLR. So in 10 or 20 years, it could be something else. So right now, CRISPR is at the forefront for doing the engineering. So CRISPR will be used to go into a living species, alter their DNA or part of their DNA, literally cut out pieces of it or move pieces around. And then that life is fundamentally changed, right?
Wow. Okay. Tell us about your acrylic painting.
Sure. I living in Hamilton, we're a little bit like maybe a good comparison is Pittsburgh, an old steel town that has sort of come back to its feet and emerged and reshaped itself, modernized itself. So, but there's a lot of old buildings and structures in Hamilton. So when I moved here 12 years ago from Toronto, I was fascinated by the historic buildings. So I just thought I would try painting, acrylic paintings. And my wife is a painter, so she's always taught or done art. But for me, it was more of a hobby, just trying a few things, and I've enjoyed it. It's been a great pastime.
Yeah, there are a lot of neat buildings in Hamilton, plus the rolling hills.
Mhm.
No, I remember that. Just you go up there and you go down. And it was really a really nice town. I thought what I saw of it. Yes.
Yes, has a great history. Yeah.
Which is funny, driving up Hamilton Mountain, you sit there and you look down, and it reminds me, I grew up in Montreal, that's where I was born. And I look down and I go, oh my goodness, it's like Montreal, like when we used to go up on Mount Broyle, and then like very similar feeling to it. And a lot of people don't know that. A lot of, there's some misnomers about Hamilton, but there's some beautiful areas. My son lived there for a little while too, and I just loved it. And he had the nice shopping areas, and yeah.
Sure. And it's right on the edge of the Niagara Escarpment. So for your listeners, that's the same escarpment Niagara falls off of. So even in Hamilton at this end, we have some smaller rivers that fall right off that escarpment. They're beautiful waterfalls. There's dozens of them around here.
And beautiful harbor too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. I used to be a member of the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, and they had they were right at the harbor front where their offices were. So I used to go and visit the executive director, and we just looking over all the sailboats and everything. Yeah, a lot of things are beautiful to see there.
Yeah, I thought it was a very, very nice town. Like you say, a lot of older buildings, a lot of architecture. It was really interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, art was my first artistic foray. I mean, my background is math and economics. So if you had asked me, would you ever write a fiction book? I would say no, ever. I would be the last person to write. I wasn't even good at English. Or that interested. Although I did do some reading, not necessarily science fiction, but in my 20s and 30s, I did start doing some independent reading, like outside the classroom. I'm not told to read something, and it became meaningful, but I never still thought I would write a novel. And now, having done it, I really enjoyed the experience. Doing podcasts like your fantastic show and others has been great. And I'm an independent author. Like I'm not attached to a publisher. I didn't even try. I just self-published, and that's been a great experience too. And I'm now writing on. I've enjoyed it so much. I'm working on 2 other books, so I would like to continue with this and try more. I'm retired, so I do have time on my hands, so that helps.
How far away are you in publishing one of your other books? Do you have any idea?
I'm doing a book on running and coaching, so ties into the triathlon, but I started as a runner, and my daughter is a runner too, so there's sort of like that father-daughter thing going on there too in the book. But lots of good stories, and I coached a lot of cross-country running in this area at Westdale High School, and then also Hillfield Strathallan College, which is a high school. So I've written about 150 pages. I think it's going to take me 2 or 3 more months, but I'm really anxious to get that out. That's more up my area actually than genetic engineering. So that'll be a nonfiction though. That's nonfiction. And then I'm going to do a sequel to my science fiction or something connected, something similar. But right now that's just in my head. I haven't written one sentence on that yet. So
You're moving up to the Renaissance man then, in a sense. I said he's moving up to the Renaissance man. You've got the art, you've got the athletics, you've got the science,
yeah, I like doing different things, which I would encourage your listeners to never shut yourself out. So if let's say you are in, I don't know, computer science, it doesn't mean you can't write a novel, a fiction novel. Or let's say you're in English or something, doesn't mean you can't do something completely different like athletics. Like pigeonholing yourself or letting others do that is not good. And having taught, that was a good experience for me, because I learned that young people have so many different talents and interests, and there's so many pathways they can take, and they can do parallel pathways with hobbies and things like that. So life's has so many opportunities for us, and it's going to feel a little insecure at times, especially if you follow your own steps and maybe don't listen to some advice from others around you. That's going to feel insecure. And there's a quote by Helen Keller, if I could. I think she said that security is mainly a superstition. And I love that quote, Helen Keller, because she's an inspiring person for one. But yeah, you're going to feel insecure. You're going to fail and go sideways at times. But for your listeners, it can take a while to figure out what you really need or want to do.
We've had so many podcast guests that they say, oh, well, I was in this direction, but due to this or that, I changed, and I'm glad I did. I would have been miserable. I would have stayed there, and somebody may have, talked to them, told them they could do it, whatever. But they were always so glad they just didn't, like you say, pigeonhole themselves in one thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they were a lot happier with the second path they chose.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mark, where can our listeners get your book?
The book Age-Decoded is, and there's a hyphen number, Age-Decoded. It's available on most of the major retailers. I can send you a link if you want to attach it to the podcast, but that link will have sort of a common link, and then from there they'll see all the retailers. But Amazon and Apple and Kobo and Indigo, they all offer that book. So if you just go to your favorite retailer and type in Age-Decoded, it should pop up. It's got a beautiful blue cover designed by an artist here in Hamilton, Tenny's Goddard. I think she did a wonderful job with these sort of, it's almost like a mystical, not quite a DNA strand, but she designed it and put in a good word for Tenny's. So you'll see it there.
Right. Lorianne, do you have anything?
I don't at this time, except for it was funny because I was just thinking one of our earlier guests that were on here were a group of students from McMaster University. And they were talking about, they were doing robotics. And so like, a mouse for people who have handicaps, not able to do it. And so they're the future. I was just thinking about, and they would be the ones that are going to be moving into this, social, the engineering, the genetic engineering, that's the next generation, right? So
Yes. Yeah.
Very neat. But thank you so much. This has been just really interesting, and I really want to pick up the book. I mean, I might get spooked by it, but then on the other hand, well, by the time this all comes out, I probably won't be here anymore anyway. So why?
Yeah, really.
It's not totally dystopian, and actually the heroine, it's heroine. The person you're really cheering for is Dr. Frida. So it's a female lead character in a science fiction. So
Nice.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, see, Lorianne, there's no male bonding or nothing going on. It's female this time.
We joke around about that. Men are like this and so, you know what, women are too, but you just don't know it.
although one of the nasty characters in the novel is also female, I should warn you. So there's a really nice protagonist and antagonist are both females.
Yeah, equal opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for hosting me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. It was great having you as our guest.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by Maono, featuring their multifunctional USB microphone, very light, tabletop, portable, affordable, and great for podcasters. Available on Amazon.